Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
आपका वीडियो आने लगेगा क्या? अभी विजिबल नहीं। हेलो,
रिकॉर्डिंग स्टार्टेड।
यस, आपका वीडियो आने लगेगा क्या? हम दोबारा कर सकते हैं क्या? आपका वीडियो नहीं दिख रहा बिल्कुल।
आ जाएगा आ जाएगा।
आ जाएगा, ठीक है। तो अभी मैं थोड़ा सा वेट करके स्टार्ट करता हूँ। नमस्कार, आई वेलकम यू टू द थर्ड एंड लास्ट एपिसोड ऑफ द डिस्कशन ऑन धर्मा वर्सेस रिलीजन विद श्री संजय दीक्षित जी. In this episode, we'll discuss views on cosmology, eschatology, and immanence. We have already discussed some issues regarding cosmology in the previous episode, Sanjay ji. I would like to ask you, what is the Hindu view of the divine, to throw some more light on. It will be wonderful if you do that.
Thank you, Pankaj ji. The Hindu view of the divine, I briefly threw a light on it when I recited that shloka from Tulsidas ji's Ramcharitmanas.
Yeah.
That Bhavani Shankaro Vande Shraddha Vishwas Rupino Yabhyam Vina Na Pashyanti Siddha Swantah Sthamishwaram. That is, the Ishwar is within you, the immanence of divine. That immanence of divine is a central concept that you can see through the Upanishads. Ishavasam sarvam yat kinch jagatyam jagat. And it pervades through the entire Vedic corpus. That is you are Ishwar. Basically, in fact, if you look at even higher concepts, then what happens is that cosmos is basically reflected within you. So your brain is actually mimicking the cosmos. And so it is there that you have to find Ishwar. So if you have to find Ishwar, then you have to go within and look at that cosmos mimicked within your brain. That is how you look at the Ishwar there, and also the Nimit, that you have one underlying unity. Then you have the Isht, that becomes the Nimit, that the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, that is actually the Nimit, and the Devatas are the cognition points within your brain. Those are the Devatas. So you have an energy cognition point, you have a compassion cognition point, you have a power cognition point. So those are all Devatas there. This is the basic scheme of envisioning the cosmos within you. And it is also because of that that the cosmos is envisioned as something infinite. The first concept of the infinity and the infinitesimal is found only in the Sanatana scriptures. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. I think every Havan, you must have heard this shloka. Whenever you do a Havan or a puja, then the Panditji comes and he chants this shloka. And if you ask him, he won't know the meaning. The Purohitas who come, and if you ask them what is the meaning of this shloka, they do it as a Purnahuti. The Purnahuti is fine, but they don't know the meaning, what it means. It's Purnamada, Purnamidam, that is whole, this is whole. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate. That is, the whole comes out of the whole. Purnat, Purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnamevavashishyate. And the whole coming out of the whole, yet the whole remains. The Purna is always Purna. This is the infinity verse. I call it the infinity verse. And similarly, you have the concept of the very small, also the infinitesimal. So the infinity and infinitesimal concepts have always existed, and that is because we envision cosmos in that form. And that cosmos we relate to the human brain. The human brain is reflective of the cosmos. That is the basic philosophy. And that basic philosophy again comes out of, because when I say this, that this kind of a cosmos can exist only if your time concept is cyclical. So, though I do treat it as fundamental, but I also call it a derived fundamental. This is not the root fundamental. This is a derived fundamental. It is like, the concept of tolerance. A lot of people define that, okay, tolerance. You cannot have tolerance if your logic system is two-valued. In a binary logic system, there is no scope for tolerance. Binary logic system, any binary logic system will inevitably lead to violence. But if you have a ternary logic system or a four-valued logic system or Chatushkoti, then tolerance becomes natural, because you know that everything has a context, and you look at things in context, then you get that value of tolerance. So they become derivatives of this. And similarly, this cosmos also is a derived fundamental. The cosmology, the concept of cosmology in the Indian system is a derived fundamental of our cyclical time concept.
Okay. So the way you describe it, Sanjay, it seems that even the modern concept of modern ideology of, let's say, liberalism or secularism, even that can shun violence, because it's also binary. Because for them, liberals are good and non-liberals are bad. They have a very simple belief system. So it seems inevitable that no matter how much they swear by non-violence, they will also turn in some way violent against their opponents. Is it so?
That is clear by empirical evidence. The kind of secularism that is practiced in India, you can see what it has become. Ultimately, what it has become is that it has become anti-Hindu.
Yeah.
So there is this form of secularism. It privileges non-Hindus over Hindus.
Over Hindus.
And only then it becomes secular. Whereas the original concept of secularism, as it happened in the West, was the separation of religion and state power. You can say power in one sphere and religion in another sphere. Now in India, you had even a more marked system of separation. You see, we had that, say, the ternary logic, if you say, then not just power and religion, you also had a separation of wealth. And that is what the Varna system actually signifies. It is a system of separation of classes. That, okay, somebody who is dealing in wealth will not become the king. As Chanakya said, that where king is a trader, there the public is impoverished. जहाँ का राजा वैश्य होता है, वहाँ की जनता भूखों मरती है. This is from Chanakya Niti. So there is great wisdom in this. That you made that Chaturvarnyamaya system guna karma vibhagasha on the basis of your functions. If you say that, okay, somebody who deals in knowledge shall be precluded from accumulating wealth. That Brahmanas, those who were the knowledge protectors or the knowledge givers, they were even forbidden from accumulating any wealth. Wealth was forbidden to them. Similarly, the king was forbidden from becoming the religious head. He could not become the religious head. There's no way that a king could give any religious commandments, unlike in the West, where the kings always had. In fact, if you look at the Islamic uh, system, then the king is always the Amirul Islam. Of course, you have the caliphate system. In the caliphate system, the two are fully combined. But even in India, when in the Mughal times, they came out of the caliphate, even then, the Mughal king was the Amirul Islam. So he became some kind of a local caliph. He again combined the temporal and spiritual powers. That kind of a system was never there in India. And that happened only because you have this multi-valued logic, your concept of infinite cosmology, which is derived from your quasi-cyclical time. So all these things are all, you could say that they complemented each other, they supplemented and complemented each other. And that is how it went.
Sanjay ji, you say that Western cosmology, religious cosmology in Christianity, the God is creator there, and His creation is given supreme importance. But in Sanatan Dharma also there are creator gods. So how do you differentiate between the two?
You see, you look at the Sanatan Dharma, when they say the creator gods, those are those are symbolisms. As I said, when I said, okay, let's take the first verse of Rig Veda. Okay? And how it is interpreted in the West, and even by some of our people who are not well versed in the Rishi Parampara, how they would look at it. So it says, Om Magni Mile Purohitam Yagyasya Devam Ritvajam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. So Agni Mile Purohitam. So there is Agni, there is a Purohit, there is Agni Mile Purohitam Yagyasya, there is Yagya, there is Dev, there is Ritvaj, and there is a Hotar, and there is Ratna. So all the Western interpretations, most, I think about 99% of them, they say that, okay, then you have the sacrificial fire, you light the sacrificial fire and you do this sacrifice, and you invoke the devatas who will give you great wealth, Ratna, Natamam. Okay? Isn't this the interpretation?
Yeah.
What is the actual Indian interpretation in the philosophy of this? Agni has 100 meanings in Sanskrit. So which Agni? Now you have to contextualize.
Yes.
Right? So Om Agni Mile Purohitam Yagyasya Devam Ritvijam. So now you take it to the higher consciousness. And this Agni, when you take it to the higher consciousness, then this Agni becomes that spark that is lit. That is lit. And what is that? Yagya. But it is Yagya that you are making your offering to your higher consciousness. And that Yagya, that spark is to be lit. And that spark is to be lit. And what are those devas? Those are those cognition points which I referred to earlier in the earlier episodes.
Okay.
So that spark lights up all your cognition points, which gives you such great power that all the treasures, and these are not material treasures.
So,
These are
Sanjay ji, but
treasures of spiritual achievements which become available to you. So the interpretation in your, when you say that you have gods who have done the creation, what gods? How do you define God? There is Upadan, that is the underlying unity. There is the Nimitta, that is the Trinity. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, that is Nimitta. And the Ishta, and that is provided to you, that is given to you because it is not possible for an ordinary person to realize the underlying material unity of the universe. And it is because of that that you have the Isht through which you go to that underlying unity. It is not for everyone to go to that underlying unity or realize the underlying unity through the Jnana Marga or the Marga of Yoga. I've done a video in which I have defined this Ekam Sat Vipra Bodhavadanti in a very different manner. I said that Ekam Sat Vipra Bodhavadanti also means the validity of all the three paths, the Bhakti Marga, the Jnana Marga, and the Yoga Marga. So the Bhakti Marga, that you say that Marga, Madhyam, and Tattva. So Bhakti Marga, and you have the, what is called, the Madhyam of your Ishta, and the Tattva is the Prema Tattva. So that is the Bhakti Marga. Then the Jnana Marga, the medium is Buddhi. Okay, in Bhakti Marga, the medium is your man, your emotions. In Jnana Marga, the medium is your Buddhi and the Tattva is Tark. So that is how you realize the underlying unity. That is how you realize the Brahma through that mark. And the yoga is experience. And that yoga, that is the Madhyam is your Chitta, Chetana. So through the Chetana, you take your consciousness to that level, and through that you go, and the Tattva, of course, is what is called Anubhuti. So Chit, you go to Chetana or Anubhuti. So all the three are valid. And if you are going to it, if you're trying to realize it through the Bhakti Marg, then all these stories, whatever are told, all stories are okay. They're perfectly fine for you to imagine, because you're trying to relate to the one unity through emotions. And when you're trying to relate it through emotions, then the flight of your mind is limitless. The flight of the intellect is limited. You're getting my point. What I'm saying is that when you're trying to achieve it to intellect, the intellect is very limited. Then you cannot have these flights of fancy. But when you are going through manas, or emotion, and the prema tattva and bhakti marg, then the flight of your mind is limitless. You imagine it and you conjure it up in whichever way it suits you, whichever way it helps you. That is how Raidas can achieve his liberation through this pure bhakti. Or a Surdas can do it. A Surdas can visualize Krishna in a different manner. Whereas if I write a Krishna Gopeshwar or a Krishna Gopeshwar, then I am writing through the medium of intellect. So that's a different take altogether. So all these paths are permitted. So if you say that, okay, this you have creation gods. Yes, we have creation gods, because it is valid through one particular medium.
Okay. Wonderful, Sanjay ji. Now moving on to eschatological questions. Why is in your articles it also comes through, and it is generally stressed in whatever literature you read about dharmic scriptures, dharmic traditions. They differ on everything. Different smritis, different shrutis, they give different injunctions for different things. They are united in one thing, that they all exhort us to know yourself, know oneself, to discover our true nature, to go after the ultimate truth, to ultimate knowledge. So why is this so important in our tradition? And if you consider the other traditions, the religious traditions, not at all is it discussed. Whoever has dared to raise these questions or queries, they have been punished in their tradition. So why is it so? Why this difference?
Yes, the punishment in that tradition is very common, very clear, because immanence is divine is something that they are not permitted to even think about. And what has happened is, especially if you take the example of, let's say, Christianity, because Christianity prohibited all this through their councils, because Christianity has evolved. The Christian canon has evolved, and it is also different in different sects. So you have a certain number of books that are honored in among Catholics. Then there is a sort, I think it's 73 or something. Then I think the Greek Orthodox people, they honor fewer. The Protestants have another number. So all of them have this different kind of canon law. And this canon law also is very, very confusing, because the Old Testament says something else, the different apostles and different creeds, they say something different. The councils, they come out with decrees, and those decrees are sometimes in total contradiction to what the earlier canon was. All that confusion is there. That confusion is there only because the church has decreed all this from a point of view of consolidating its own power. And in that power, and once you say that, okay, the time is linear, then there is a God which has done the creation, then that God cannot be part of that creation. He has to be outside it. Therefore, you cannot be one with God. Because if you become one with God, then you have the potential to become God. That potential to become God is available only in Indic systems, particularly Sanatana Dharma. That potential to become God is not available in Abrahamic religions. In Christianity, it is forbidden, and in Islam, of course, even if you talk about it, it's a great blasphemy. Whereas it wasn't like this. If you look at the 9th century turmoil within Islam, the great fight between the Mu'tazilis and your Ash'arites and the Tahqiqis, it's all on this point, the immanence of divine. But ultimately, the Ash'arites, they created their hadiths, all these hadiths were created by the Ash'arites some 200 to 300 years after the death of the Prophet. And Ibn Ishaq's biography is even later, actually, but backdated. And backdated to read much earlier, okay. Ibn Ishaq heard from somebody, who heard from somebody else, and who heard from somebody else, exactly like hadith. So the date given to it, I think, is 692 or something. Not exactly sure of the date, but it is in 7th century, of course. But it came only in late 19th century, late 9th century. In fact, probably in the 10th century. So all the requirements of the church or the caliphate had to be served by whatever creed was finally adopted, whether by Islam or by Christianity. Whereas as far as Sanatana Dharma is concerned, there, as I said right in the beginning, it is basically anthropocentric or homocentric. That it actually works to exalt a human being to the status of divine. That is the entire effort, that a human being becomes divine. He becomes one with the Brahma, one with the ultimate. And even if you compare that, the God of Christianity, the God and the Allah of Islam, you make a comparison, so they come up to their tawheed or their unity is only at the limit of what our concept of isht is. And that is why there is great confusion in the minds of the Abrahamics, and they call Indians, or they call the Hindus as polytheists. We are not polytheists. We know and we understand. We not only understand the underlying unity of all being, it is stated multiple times, such as in Gita. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsu avinashyantam yah pashyati sapashyati. What does it mean? It means that there is that one underlying unity. And that one underlying unity is manifested in myriad forms. So at one level, it is manifested in the great Nimitt, the Trinity, the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and then down below you have the 33 categories of devatas, your cognition points that I have described in cosmology. And not just that, then you can have your Ishta Devata, you can have your Kula Devata, you can have your Rashi Devata. I was born in Banaras. They gave me 4 names. And Sanjay is only my Vyavaharik name. Otherwise, there was a separate Rashi Naam, there was a Dev Naam, there was a Nakshatra Naam. And because divine inheres in everyone, you have the freedom to worship anyone and everyone. I could worship you. You cannot object. That I can make a deity of Pankaj Devta and start worshipping you tomorrow. You can have no objection. That is perfect.
I hope you don't.
That's just an example. Just an example. That is how you find people worshipping trees, they're worshipping water, they're worshipping rivers, they worship everything. It is not because of some fools who think that they are worshipping multiple gods. They are only worshipping multiple forms of that same underlying unity, which those people fail to understand because their God is limited only to the middle level, the Ishta level. That is what it is. It's not beyond that. There's no concept of the underlying unity of all forms.
Yeah, that's because they do not understand unity at all.
Because God has created only earth, and the God has created only human beings, and everything else is created for his consumption. That is the limited understanding of those religions. And again, I would say that is actually an outcome of their basic fundamentals. Because if you have linear time, if you have two-valued logic, and if you have epistemology where word is the only proof, then that is the only system you can have. You cannot have anything different.
This is wonderful, Sanjay. At last, I would want to address one question, one query, because some scholars, even from our side, say that this distinction between dharma and religion is now overplayed. And because it sounds like that, why did so many people, we are now around 1 billion. So this confusion about confusing dharma with religion, this is not a feature of a few people. This is very, very prevalent. Almost everyone, even common man, they will consider that, oh yes, Islam may be a little more aggressive, or they are a little rigid, fundamentalist and zealots, and yes, but it is a sadhana paddhati, it is a puja paddhati, it is some sort of sect which ought to be respected or given some place. So why is this confusion between dharma and religion so widespread? Because when we say that they are not at all, like you said, they are diametrically opposite to each other. If that is the case, then why is it so that this confusion has been so widespread? Because some allege that this sounds like a conspiracy theory, that at some point of time someone came and spread this confusion about that religion is also dharma, gave it legitimacy, Gandhi, to take the name, and after that this confusion is spread everywhere. so why is confusion so widespread? Yeah.
The theory of Sarva Dharma Sambhav is actually to blame for that. Because for the first time, I think Gandhiji exalted these religions to the status of dharma without demanding anything in return.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in fact, that is also the reason that the partition happened. Partition happened because the other side realized that you were suffering from an inferiority complex. Of course, now my full book is going to be coming there. It would have come from Bloomsbury, but then I terminated the contract. You know the reasons. So now
Yes.
it will come from Garuda Prakashan, but it will come around the same time. It was originally supposed to be released on September 20th. It will still be around that time only. So I have examined this particular phenomenon in that book in a fair amount of detail. And I think it was a huge blunder that they did. And it was because of that that the fundamentals got obfuscated, which were very clear to all our rishis, whether you, even if you look at the 19th century rishis or 20th century rishis, whether you look at in the 20th century, you look at Sri Aurobindo, or you look at Raman Maharshi, or even some of the modern people like Swami Chinmayanand, it's absolutely clear. There is no confusion at all because they know the fundamentals. And Mahatma Gandhi was described by Sri Aurobindo as a Russian Christian in the form of an Indian body, a Russian
Yes.
Christian in an Indian body, and that's what he became. And he did not, I don't think he meant anything, any ill, but then that was his genuine confusion. And because he adopted that chola of a sadhu, a Mahatma, then
But he was
the
not.
Indian people, they went along with him and they suffered for it, and they suffered very badly for it. And my endeavor in bringing this talk in association with the Indus University is just this, that please let the fundamentals be clear, because there are fundamentals, and it is because we do not address the fundamentals, we only go to the symptoms that arise of those fundamentals, we only go to the derivatives that arise of those fundamentals, that we are not able to appreciate the difference. I mean, what is the puja paddhati? Let's take an example. What do you mean by puja paddhati? There can be no puja paddhati in those religions which only aspire for hell or heaven, because hell and heaven is bondage. It is an eternal bondage. They are praying to get into an eternal bondage. And in Sanatan Dharma, all worship or prayer, okay, there is also a difference between worship and prayer, which people have forgotten.
Yeah.
So all worship and all prayer is to release you from bondage and attain
That's
what
a
is
good way
called
of putting it.
liberation or moksha. That is, in that quasi-cyclical, time-cyclical, you get out of that. It is possible for you to get out of that time, quasi-cyclical time cycle. Absolutely different. Absolutely diametrically opposite. But this is what I sometimes, I crack a joke in my home when people ask for many things while worshipping a deity. I crack this joke. I mean, okay, any realized deity, because all deity by definition are realized beings whom you are worshipping.
Yeah.
So any realized being, why should he or she grant you any bondage? Suppose you are asking for great wealth or great power or great position or a great marriage or great sons, grandsons. All this is bondage. Why should a realized deity even think of giving you that? Ask him or her what he or she would love to give you. That is release from bondage. So, very confused scenario that it is my endeavor to keep talking about it so that people realize the fundamental differences, that there are fundamental differences, that all religions are indeed not the same. In fact, not just not the same, they're diametrically opposite, not just in their purpose, but also in their intents and in their behavior. In everything, they are totally different. And once you realize that, only then you will be able to build counters to the aggressive behavior of these binary dominating or seeking to dominate political ideologies.
Wonderful, Sanjay ji. This was a wonderful conclusion to a very good discussion in 3 episodes. To everyone who is watching this episode, I would request you to like, share this video, and also subscribe to the channel. I will finally thank you, Sanjay to accepting this invitation for this a series of discussion. It was very enlightening, and we will surely discuss on other subjects in future. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you very much.